If you're looking for the best bang for the buck 32:9 ultra-wide, then I think the Innocn 45C1R is definitely going to be a top contender. So let me give you the summary right up front so I don't waste your time. Who is this monitor for? This monitor is for gamers who want the most immersion, like an ultra-wide, but they want it at an affordable price. Right now, this monitor is on sale for $600. It usually sells for $700, but it's going to be right around there. And I think for that price, this is an absolutely fantastic value. Now, who is this monitor not for? I would say it's probably not for people who are looking to do a lot of productivity or content creation or video editing or photo editing, those sorts of things. I think if you know that your workflow works well with ultrawides, then it's still going to be for you. But if you don't know if your workflow is going to work well with ultrawides and you're looking to do mostly productivity, I would say probably steer away from this, or at least go try out an ultrawide before you commit to something like this. Okay, so that's the summary. If you appreciate me doing the summary at the start of the video, feel free to like and subscribe. And now let's get into a little bit more of the nitty gritty. Quick disclaimer, Innocn did send over this monitor for review, but they have absolutely no control over what I say in the video. Everything in here is my thoughts and opinions, and I will not be making corrections to anything unless I get something factually wrong, then I'll correct it. All right, cool, we got that out of the way. Now let's just do the specs real quick. I'm just gonna put them on screen because you can just read the spec sheet, and I'll talk about them a little bit throughout the video, but I actually don't think the specs are that important. I think what's more important is what the user experience is while you're using the monitor, and so we're going to focus in more on that, or basically the things you can't learn from just reading a spec sheet. So first we're going to go over the monitor hardware itself, then we're going to go over my gaming experience, then we'll go over the productivity experience, and then we can all go home and eat ice cream or do whatever you want, go to sleep, do your thing. Starting with the hardware, this monitor is 32:9, which if you're not familiar with that aspect ratio, a very normal aspect ratio is 16:9, and so 32:9 is just two 16:9 monitors side by side with no bezel in the middle. That helped me understand what it means. And it's 45 inches, and 45 inches is an absolutely monster monitor. I mean, you can tell from back here, I have a pretty normal sized desk. I would have said it's a big desk, but it's a pretty normal sized desk. And this monitor takes up the entire thing. Now, having a monitor being big is not a good thing, and it's not a bad thing. I would say if you have the space for it, it's a really good thing. If you don't have the space for it, it's a really bad thing. So you have to decide, can your setup fit a 45-inch monitor? Maybe. I will say that while the stand that it comes with is really good and that it gives you a lot of adjustments, you can do side to side, you can do tilt, and you can do swivel, and it does also have height adjust. And so the adjustments are really good. The thing I don't like about the stand is it's kind of a triangle or tripod style stand. And because of that, it takes up a lot of the Z depth on my desk. It takes up about half of my desk. I mean, or at least it intrudes on about half of my desk because the monitor is huge and it needs that stable base so it doesn't tip over. The workaround here is that this monitor is VESA mount compatible, so if you wanted to, and what I would probably recommend doing if you have a smaller desk like me, is getting some sort of monitor arm with a clamp on the back, and then you can clamp it, and then it won't take up very much room on your desk, whereas this monitor stand takes up a bunch of room. And you might be thinking, yeah, you can already fit your keyboard and mouse, why do you need more room? And the reason is because sometimes I like to set my laptop and I'll scoot my keyboard and mouse back, but because the monitor stand is in the way, I can't set it back just to set my laptop down. So that would be one example. The monitor itself is pretty much all plastic. The stand is metal and it feels very sturdy constructed, but the rest of the monitor is mostly plastic. I would say visually, it looks really nice. Because of this curve, it's a 1500R curve, it looks really aesthetically pleasing. It's bright and the colors are punchy and poppy and it looks nice. But there are some physical downsides or aesthetic downsides, at least for me. One of them is the chin. It's got this big old cloth chin, which looks like a massive speaker bar. So I would say like, all right, well, if you're gonna put a big speaker bar, great, let's hear the speakers. But the speakers sound like ass. There are two 5-watt speakers and they sound so bad. They made the chin for it and it looks like a speaker bar, so it's a little bit annoying to me that they didn't make a reasonable sounding speaker bar. The workaround here, you put in headphones or you bring your own speakers or whatever you want to do. The other part, as far as aesthetics, that kind of bugs me about this monitor is that the bezels, if you look at them closely, the top bezel and the side bezel and the bottom bezel are all slightly different sizes. Now, if you don't care, throw that out. That bugged me. For the first few days of using the monitor, that was all I could see, was that the bezels were different sizes. Now that I've been using it for a while, I actually forgot, and that doesn't bother me at all. But I wrote it down as like, oh man, this is terrible. And turns out it's not that big of a deal. So if that matters to you, it matters to you. If it doesn't, it doesn't. And the last tiny thing as far as aesthetics go is that they put their logo, their company logo, right smack in the middle. A lot of companies do this. I don't like it. I don't want to see your company logo on the front. I just want to see the screen and some black bezels. It's annoying to me. That being said, almost everyone does it, so Innocn is not unique in this. That's just what the industry does. The port selection on the monitor is pretty good, and one thing that is a standout feature for a monitor in this price point is that it has USB Type-C with power delivery with up to 65 watts. 65 watts is actually enough to fully power my MacBook Pro 16-inch with M1 Max. I can use it as much as I want. It keeps it charged up. That's great. And if you watch this channel, you're probably big into handheld PCs. And 65 watts is enough to power every handheld that I'm aware of, but definitely if you want to plug in your ROG Ally X, your Steam Deck, your Lenovo Legion Go, whatever you want to plug in, it's going to get enough power and it'll send the display to the ultrawide, so then you can play on a bigger screen with just one cable. Super convenient. That is a big feature for me. Another thing that's nice that this monitor has is you can use the monitor as basically a hub, an accessories hub. Well, it has Ethernet, which means I can plug in my MacBook, which does not have an Ethernet port, and I can plug in my PC, which does, but then both of them are getting Ethernet through the monitor, which is really convenient. And it means if you want to plug in your Steam Deck, now when you plug your Steam Deck in with the Type-C cable, the Steam Deck is not only getting power and displaying to an external display, it's also getting Ethernet, which is just really convenient. I love that feature. It also has two USB 3.0 ports. Those aren't going to be the fastest ports, but they are pretty convenient if you just need to plug in a flash drive and your laptop doesn't have a USB Type-A port. A lot of laptops don't have that anymore, so it's nice to have a hub built into the monitor. All right, so now we need to talk about gaming, because this is where this monitor really pops off, and I would say punches way above its weight class. If you're someone who likes to play story-driven, visually impressive AAA games, something like that, something like a Red Dead Redemption or a Cyberpunk or a Space Marine 2 or I don't know, something like that, this monitor looks so good. It's unbelievable. I've never played games on an ultrawide before, and this is an ultrawide or whatever you want to call it. 32:9 is just a really wide screen. And man, the first game I booted up was Red Dead 2, and I've put a ton of hours into that game on a ton of different screens. I'm very familiar with how that game looks, and this is my favorite way to play it. It looks so good. I ended up just running around the countryside, or riding around the countryside on my trusty steed, because I just wanted to keep looking at things while you're riding. I don't know if it's because it wraps around your head and it kind of fills your periphery, or what it is. It's got to be that. It kind of fills your periphery, but man, it looks so nice. And at the 120 hertz refresh rate and with 400 nits of brightness and a 3000:1 contrast ratio, everything about this monitor just pops when it's playing games like that. I was blown away. Then I booted up Cyberpunk, and when you're driving in a car in Cyberpunk and you're in the actual driver's seat, like behind the steering wheel, it's so cool because you can see the mirrors in your periphery just like in a normal car, and you can see out the windows, the side windows of the car. It looks so cool and it is so immersive. And that's one thing where it's like, that curve of the screen, I didn't think it would be that useful. I kind of thought it was just going to look cool. But when the screen is getting this wide, having it curve around and meet you on the sides, man, it makes it so much more immersive, and it kind of tricks your brain into thinking, not quite this much, but it kind of tricks your brain into thinking that it just keeps going forever. Like it just fills up the entirety of your periphery, if that makes any sense. So I was absolutely blown away with how good gaming is. I think if you played like any flight games or any driving simulators or anything like that, I think those sorts of games are going to crazy pop off. They are going to look really, really good. Now, those aren't the only types of games that I play. I also play some other games, and I had not as positive of an experience with games like, for example, I've been playing a lot of Marvel Rivals, which is kind of an Overwatch clone, or it's similar to Overwatch. I'll just say that. It's a twitchy, fast-paced shooter. And One thing is that that game does not support the aspect ratio of 32:9. It doesn't support it. The widest aspect ratio it supports is 21:9. Now, when I first did that, I thought, oh man, you got these big old black bars on the side. That's going to be really annoying. But I found within like 5 minutes, I had totally forgotten that there are black bars. One reason why is because it's a VA panel, the contrast ratio is pretty good, so the blacks are more black than an IPS panel, so it's easier to ignore them. But then also, just having your content smack dab in the middle, you quickly forget that the rest of it is screen. And I would say, if you're going to play mostly those games, which are not ultra-wide games, then just buy a regular monitor. There's no point in spending the extra money to get an ultra-wide. But if you want to play a lot of story-driven games like your Red Deads and your Cyberpunks, and then sometimes you also want to play these other games, then I'm shocked at how good the experience was to just play a regular, like you could play it at regular 16:9. It's still a really good experience. The only caveat there, and this was just for Marvel Rivals, was that, the game did not like that this was an unknown aspect ratio. It did all sorts of weird things. I had to toggle between like full screen and Windows borderless and change the resolution and the aspect ratio, and eventually I got it to look the way I wanted it to look, but it took a little more fiddling than just click 16:9, click 1440p, and you're good to go. You'd think that's how it would work, but it didn't work like that. I had to fiddle with it a little bit. And not that big of a deal, just to say it was a little fiddly. So that's gaming. As far as like ultra-wide bang for the buck goes, I don't think it gets better than this. I think it gets different, but I don't think it gets better. Fantastic. Now we got to talk about productivity and video editing and that sort of thing, and I think this is where this monitor falls behind a little bit. One reason is because while the color accuracy is really good, it's got 100% sRGB coverage, and it gets bright, and it's got good contrast, and the colors are vivid and poppy. It's a VA panel, and if you're not familiar with VA panels, one of the big downsides of VA panels is that as soon as you get slightly off center from the monitor, the colors wash out a lot. And the problem is, when you have a monitor this big, it's really easy to not sit perfectly dead center. And like, here's how sensitive it is. For example, I'm sitting in a rocking chair. It's something I sit in all the time because I'm twitchy and I like to rock while I work. And even just the motion of rocking back and forth a little bit, it's not that noticeable, but if you look for it, you can see color distortion, even just from moving your head in and out like a few inches. So to me, that's a little bit bothering. And if I'm doing color accurate work and I have to remember, oh no, I have to keep my head right here, I can't move it back a little bit or move it forward a little bit, that's not gonna work for me. That's too sensitive. Because what if I'm really leaned forward and then I do all my color correcting and then I lean back and it doesn't look the same? That just isn't gonna fly for me. So I would say if you're doing very critically color accurate work, probably this isn't gonna be a good monitor for you. The frustrating part about that is the colors do look really good. It's just you have to be sitting right in the middle. As soon as you get off to the side one way or another, or if you have like another person standing next to you and they're looking at the monitor, it's not going to look nearly as good for them. Another reason why I don't think productivity is as good on this monitor is that although it's a 1440p by 5K display, which sounds incredibly, I mean, that's a lot of pixels right there. It's 5K, that's a ton of pixels. Because the monitor is so big, the pixel density isn't that strong. And I found that both on macOS and on Windows, text is a tiny bit blurry. It's not a big deal. I can still definitely read the text, but if you want to maximize your screen real estate and have everything be small so that you can fit more stuff on the screen, then I found that text was a little bit blurrier than I was comfortable with. And after hours of doing productivity work, which for me was video editing, I did notice my eyes were more fatigued than when I use other more pixel dense monitors. Those are actually, I think those are my only two complaints when it, oh no, I do have one more, which is that I had thought that because it's an ultrawide, I'd just be able to throw my video editor on there and it would just be this massive canvas that I could be super productive with and it was gonna be awesome. And while that's partially true, it's also partially not true, unfortunately, and it's because ultrawides of this size, programs and software aren't generally optimized to work that well on something like this. So what ends up happening is that most of your workspace, the stuff you interact with, is right in the middle of the screen. And then when you want to grab your tools, you have to go all the way to the right or all the way to the left. And because the right and left are really far away, it actually takes a while for your mouse to get there. It sounds silly, but it actually does make a difference. And so what I found is that the sides of the screen were too far away for me to use in my video editor for me to use effectively and enjoy it. So what I actually did is I just used the inside, basically 21:9, like the middle of the monitor, and I made that my main monitor, and then I had two kind of skinnier monitors on the side. And that worked great. I liked keeping a file browser on the side, or like music or your email or whatever it is for you. Those worked really well, but it was a bit of a bummer for me because I am usually a person where I just like to put one program up, make it really big, and then I just focus in on that program. And I found if you do that on a monitor of this size, I don't think it's as efficient as using actually just a smaller monitor. But I want to be clear with that one, that is very much personal preference. I mean, all of these are personal preference, but that one especially, I'm sure there are a ton of people who are like, no, I love my ultra wide and that's exactly why I like it. So maybe test it out for yourself and see if it would work for you and your workflow. I'm just trying to say, don't assume that it will work better for your workflow because the screen is bigger. Ultra wides are kind of a weird aspect ratio, and here's another example. If you go to web pages and you maximize a web page on an ultra wide like this, the content is basically only taking up your regular 16:9, which is the middle, which means you have a whole nother 16:9 screen that is being totally unused. Does that make sense? That's kind of how the software feels, is that you just have a lot of wasted space. Oh, and one other thing I noticed, when the monitor is off, because of the curve, my eyes, when I look at the monitor, it tries to focus in on reflections that are coming off the monitor, but it can't really focus in on it because the monitor is curved. And so your brain does this weird like focus, unfocus, and can't quite figure it out. That being said, as soon as you turn the monitor on, it goes away. Oh, but we should talk about reflections because there's a window right behind the monitor, and this monitor got more than bright enough to counteract any light pollution coming through that window. I had no problem with it. But I will say, because it's a curved ultra wide, you do pick up a lot of reflections that will be coming from this side. So if the monitor's here, if there's light sources over here that are bright, the monitor very much picks them up. And actually, I have one right here, and I tried to position it as carefully as I could, but I bet you can probably see if I lean out. Well, I don't know if you can see it. Anyway, it picks up reflections more than a flat monitor because of the curve. It's able to pick up a huge amount of reflections. So if you're in a room with a lot of windows, maybe this wouldn't be a good idea. I still think it gets bright enough to counteract those reflections, or at least most of them, but you know, your mileage may vary. So that's been my experience. I would say for gaming, awesome, fantastic device. For productivity, good. Not great, but totally good. So I'd say if you're doing mostly gaming, this is a good monitor for you. If you're doing mostly productivity, probably look at something else, unless you know that you like these super ultra wide aspect ratios for productivity, then hats off to you and enjoy it. All right, that's the video. If you have any questions, let me know in the comment section below. I'm Sam, and if you liked the video, please leave a like and subscribe. It really helps out the channel, and it helps me out personally, so I thank you. All right, thanks for doing that. Okay, I'll see you all in the next one. Peace.